As we have been looking at the Gospel of Mark now for some weeks, we get to an interesting point here, about a quarter of the way through, asking the question, do you ever feel alone? Is there ever a time, even in a room full of people, do you ever feel alone? Or maybe the issue is you feel like you are never alone. Maybe you got kids and you feel like you can never get a second by yourself, and they're constantly in front of you, and people are always telling you, you're going to miss this time, and you're thinking, well, I'm not right now. Maybe you feel alone all the time. Maybe you feel like you're never alone, but facing that issue can sometimes be one of the most difficult things we confront, because there are times when whatever we face, however difficult it may be, we will feel as though nobody understands the depth of what we are experiencing in the moment. That even people in our own house don't fully grasp the weight that we're carrying with us. Well, Jesus takes a look at this in a very interesting way, very comforting way, beginning in Mark chapter 4, starting down in verse 35. If you want to use a Bible on the rack there in front of you, it's on page 839. And if you do not have a Bible, please take one of those. Or maybe you don't have a Bible, maybe it's a translation that you have trouble understanding that you do have. Please take that one home with you. Everybody needs a Bible that they can grab a hold of. There, Mark chapter 4, verse 35, start on page 839 down at the bottom. Jesus has been teaching for a little while, and then at the end of the day, this is what happens. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and the other boats were with him. Now, it's an interesting scene that isn't included in some of the other retellings of this. Jesus looks to his disciples and says, let's go across the other side of the sea. That's the Sea of Galilee. It's this massive lake, miles across. And they leave the crowd there on the shore. And the disciples, not just the 12 apostles, but his group of disciples that's bigger than just 12 people, they get in a bunch of boats. And probably some of the crowd got in some boats too. And there's this massive caravan of boats going across the Sea of Galilee. Have you ever been on a family trip with you, your cousins or whatever, your brothers, sisters, whatever, and there's a bunch of you in several cars and you're traveling a big distance? Anybody ever done that? I can remember when I was a kid, we, my family, we had 3 kids and 2 parents, 5, but then my aunt and uncle, with Megan, they adopted one, they have 9 kids. They had a big 15-passenger van. We had our vehicle, and then one time my grandparents went, and we did this big trip to Georgia to see distant relatives. Well, my grandmother's brother and his whole family over there. And it was a caravan. It was my parents and our Astro van. I mean, it was the late 80s, early 90s. Anybody remember Astro vans? That was my first car. I drove my mom's Astro van around, so that was great. 4-cylinder, it could really get up and go. And so we were in the Astro van. My cousins were in their big 15-passenger green diesel van. And then my granddad and grandmother and the dog, they always brought the dog, were in his, if he were alive today, he'd kill me for not remembering what kind of car he had. It was a Chevy something. He only bought Chevys, but I cannot for the life of me think of what it was. It was a massive Land Cruiser, basically. And they were in that car. He had my grandmother set up in the back with pillows, and he had a TV VCR combo and bought her a bunch of Gaither tapes. And that she would watch those Gaither tapes while he would drive, and we would go along the way. Pre-cell phone days, so if somebody had to go to the bathroom, you just hoped that they could communicate that to the other vehicles in the caravan, and we were making our way. And so that's kind of the way it is here with Jesus in these boats. It's Jesus in one boat with some of his disciples and other disciples in other boats, and then you got some of the crowd in boats. It's this massive group crossing this several miles wide sea in the night. Let's look what happens. Verse 37. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he, Jesus, was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Now, the way that, in doing some research, some of these boats were built is in the stern of the boat. There was almost like a little half deck up there that they could stand on and do some stuff with the rigging or whatever. Most likely, Jesus is under that on a cushion there in the front of the boat. And this storm comes up. It says, what does it say, a windstorm? That word means a sudden violent wind, which the Sea of Galilee is famous for, because the way it's situated with some nearby hills and mountains and the sea level, that the sudden windstorms were almost instantaneous, and they were incredibly violent. Well, they're out there in the middle, and the disciples are going crazy. And what strikes me about this is many of the disciples were fishermen. They grew up, they made their living fishing on this sea. And so they've been through a bunch of these windstorms before. So something must be interesting and unique and rough about this windstorm, more so than others. That the disciples are having a cow, thinking they're going to die, and so they go and wake up Jesus. And they ask what I think is a very dishonoring question. Do you not care that we are perishing? They ask if he even cared. If he even cared. Do you even care that we're dying here? Think about just for a second. Most famous Bible verse in all of Scripture. For God so loved the world that he sent his one and only Son, Jesus. So to ask this question, do you even care that we're dying, completely misses what's happening here. They have Jesus, the Son of God, in the boat with them. And they're scared of the storm that's around them. Verse 39. And he awoke and he rebuked the wind. Rebuked the wind. That's commanding, a threatening command. He rebukes the wind and the sea, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Now, I love that phrase there that he uses for peace. It means a calm, a great calm after a storm. And so he says that, and then what happens in the rest of that verse? The wind ceased, and there was a great calm after the storm. He said peace, and there was peace. And then he turns to his disciples, and he says to them, "Why are you so afraid?" That word means cowardly. Why are you so cowardly? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear. They feared a great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" They were afraid. Not because they feared Jesus, but it was a fear of a realization of the power of the moment. It was easy to assent in their mind and say, okay, this is the Son of God, and we've seen people healed, and now they are the ones experiencing the miracle as the storm stops and their mouths drop open and they say, this is for real. This isn't just something that affects other people. This is the real deal. Who is this that even nature does what he says? I mean, I can go outside all day long and say, stop raining. I want the yard to die so I can stop mowing. But that doesn't mean it's going to stop raining like yesterday when we look out the window and it's still going. They say, who is this guy? Is this, and they're not questioning again if he really is the Son of God. They're just amazed at what they just experienced. This is real. This isn't just something that we're watching other people experience. This is something that we're experiencing. But even in that, what's amazing to me, they had seen him heal people. They had heard him teach. They had even upended their own lives and quit their jobs to follow Jesus. And yet, even in that, the storm comes and they're scared. They're fearful. They're uncertain. They don't know what's going to happen. because this violent windstorm is kicking up. The water is coming in the boat. It says it's filling. It's up to their ankles, up to their calves. And they're fearful that the boat's gonna flood and they're going to drown and they're going to die. And there's Jesus just asleep, all peaceful there in the front of the boat. And they wake him up. Do you not even care? Well, of course he cared. He came to earth and he was going to die for them. He called them out specifically. But before addressing their lack of faith, he stands up and he brings peace to them. He calms the storm. And then he turns to them and says, what's the deal, guys? Why are you so afraid? Did you forget that I was in the boat with you? Did you forget that I was in the boat? That I was there the whole time? Obviously you came to me and you asked me to help, but I was with you the whole time. Why did you allow the storm to get the better of you? You see, the truth of the situation is there was no better place for them to be than in the storm with Jesus. Because in a storm with Jesus is always better than no storm without Jesus. In a storm with Jesus is always better than no storm without Jesus. We may think no storm in our lives, no difficulty, no anxiety-inducing situation is what we want. But if that means we don't get Jesus, then it's not worth it. Easy life without Jesus is not worth it. These guys, this storm, this may be the first storm they went through with Jesus. They were going to experience a lot more than just this by the time they died. And they would need to realize you need Jesus through all of it. People are going to let you down. Situations are going to let you down. This world that is broken is going to let you down. There's going to be health problems and issues. The church is going to let you down. Maybe you've been thinking in your life at times, and I don't like church because so-and-so went to church and they did this to me and they said that to me and they did this and they talked about this from Scripture, and maybe it was out of context. Maybe they were right. I don't know, but maybe their attitude was wrong. But the issue is people are not Jesus. People are sinful and people are going to let you down, but Jesus never will. And so in the storm with Jesus is always better than no storm without him. And so no matter what you're going through, maybe it's a health issue, maybe it's a financial issue, maybe it's a big leap of faith. You're about to make a big decision in your life that you don't know how it's going to turn out. But if you've got Jesus with you, it's better to be with him in the midst of that moment than outside of the moment without him. Because if you don't have him, you're not going to make it. You're going to fall, you're going to fail, you're going to trip up, and you're just not going to make it. You need Jesus in the storm. The disciples had Jesus in the storm. They did turn to him, but they didn't turn to him out of peace and strength. They turned to him out of fear, which we always can do because he's always there. Jesus brought them through the storm. His presence could have provided them with so much more peace. You know, when I was a little kid, we lived in a town called Cleburne, Texas. Anybody heard of Cleburne, Texas? Well, it's a lot bigger than it was then. Then it was a little small town. Like we barely had a Walmart small. And Cleburne was famous and still is for having about a bajillion tornadoes a year. Right in the heart, just south of Fort Worth, we would get tornadoes like, I almost said like we get rain, but we don't get much rain here. We would get tornadoes every day like the sun came up. I mean, it was just a lot of tornadoes. And many of my childhood memories, and we moved to Houston when I was 9, but pre that age, many of my memories from Cleburne are being in the hallway in our house with a mattress at an angle over us because tornadoes are coming through. Parents would come and wake us up 2 a.m. There's a tornado. We'd roll out of bed. They'd get the mattress off of one of my bunk beds and bring it into the hall. And there'd be my mom and me and my sister. And then the other sister was born. And we'd all be just lined up there under that little mattress. My dad wasn't there because my dad was standing out on the front porch watching the tornado. As the windows got sucked out of the garage, Dad's standing on the front porch watching it happen. Just being there. And I was asleep in the hallway. Totally fine and comfortable with the assumption as an 8-year-old kid, my dad's got it handled. So I can be at peace and fall back asleep. So even to this day, no matter how bad it storms outside, I'm asleep. The rest of the family can be awake because it's rattling the windows in the house, but I'm out, boom, spiritual gift, falling asleep. I'm dead. And it's from those tornadoes as a little kid, I think. But I was totally at peace knowing that my Father had the situation at hand. These disciples did not turn to Jesus. They had the author of peace 2 feet away. And instead of looking to him to find peace, they looked to the rough seas. They looked to how bad the situation was getting from their perspective, instead of looking to Jesus for comfort. But look at what happens next on their journey across. Chapter 5, verse 1. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Now, just try to picture the situation, and Mark is going to describe the man in just a sec, but they cross the several miles across the Sea of Galilee. They get to this other side, and it says immediately. So as soon as Jesus gets out of the boat, here comes a man with a demon in him running out of the tombs. Try to put yourselves in, maybe not Jesus' position, but the position of the disciples, having come through the storm, and now here comes a demon-possessed man running out of the tombs at you. Are you thinking, let's get back in the boat, Jesus, let's go down a little bit? We touched land at the wrong spot. But Jesus gets out, and it says there met him a man from the tombs. This man with unclean spirit comes charging at him. Verse 3. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. This man, he's possessed by a demon. And it says possessed here in just a second, but more accurately, the translation is he was oppressed. He was, tortured by these demons. And he's out there among the tombs. They tried to shackle him. They tried to chain him up, but they couldn't. He wasn't in town with the people because he was too much of a problem. He was too much of an issue. He was too far gone in their minds. They took him out to the tombs and they tried to chain him up out there to keep him away from the regular people because he was too much of a problem. But he still caused problems, and he still yelled and screamed. He cut himself with stones. He ran up into the mountains and came back down the mountains, and they just didn't want to deal with him anymore, so they put him out there by himself. Verse 6. When he saw Jesus from afar, this is important, he ran and fell down before him. So he noticed Jesus coming across the Sea of Galilee, and he runs up to him and falls down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you, by God, do not torment me." For he was saying, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." So the man's not oppressed by one demon. He's got a bunch of them in him. He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. So the demons are begging Jesus now. Verse 11. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. And they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs. Let us enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. Now, we discussed this passage last night in our family devotion. And the question that came up was, why did the demons go in the pigs? And then why did the pigs die? Scripture doesn't tell us, and any attempt to try to say why this happened is just a guess. One of my kids had a great observation. They said maybe the demons were just trying to do anything they could to get away from Jesus. They didn't want to go, in another passage, they didn't want to go into the abyss They didn't want to be cast out by the Son of God who had absolute power. And so they asked permission to try to get away to the pigs, try to get away from, maybe they were trying to just destroy something, but as much as they could. They knew Jesus wouldn't let them destroy the man. And so maybe let us go into the pigs, just trying to cause destruction. You ever been with somebody who's so mad that they just want to destroy something? Like, it doesn't matter what they do or what they say. They know they've lost the argument, but they're just going to say whatever on the way out, slam the door extra hard, punch the wall extra hard, peel out in the car, just try to do something destructive. Well, these demons did something destructive. But I do want you to notice, it didn't say that Jesus instigated where the demons were going to go. He didn't say, get out of the man, go into the pigs. They asked where they could go, and he gave them permission. There's a lot of bad things that happen in this world that Jesus did not instigate or make happen. The world is broken. Sin broke it. There's also evil forces in the world that do all kinds of bad stuff. Yes, everything that happens has to happen with God's permission. Why did Jesus allow the pigs to die? I don't know. I mean, I guess it's better that pigs die than the man. And because of what happens to the man, he gets saved. Why does God allow certain things to happen? I don't know. I heard it said one time in a parable, some people were drowning in a flood. Rescue boat comes out to save them. Starts pulling them out of the water. But it's the middle of a hurricane. The boat's going up and down and tossing. As they're pulling people out of the water, the people are getting sick on the boat, and they're wanting to go back in to the dock, and they're begging the captain of the ship, let's get out of the storm. I can't stand how rough it is out here and how bad the storm is. And the captain's saying, no, we're going to stay as long as we possibly can to save as many as we possibly can. The seas may be rough. The storm may be bad. But the captain's trying to save as many as he can. We need to help him bring as many to salvation as possible. And so these pigs go down the hill. They die. The demons are out of the man. But the pig herdsmen have a problem. Verse 14. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country. And the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. The man was at peace. So just as Jesus had calmed the storm, had calmed the sea and brought peace, Jesus calmed the man and brought peace. He had calmed, as another one of my children said last night, calmed the storm outside and calmed the storm inside. And he had brought the man to great peace there. In this. Now, you need to recognize something. This side of the Sea of Galilee where they're at, it's like the other side of the tracks. Like, these are all Gentiles here. And so for Jews to step in this distinctly Gentile area in the first century was something they didn't do. This was like, we're Jews, we don't go there, because, that's where the Gentiles live. And we don't like Gentiles are bad people. They do bad stuff. They don't like God. God's going to, he's going to send them all where they need to go, and we're not going to go deal with them. But Jesus told his disciples, we're going over there to Gentile country. You get to Gentile country, man comes running out of the tombs, possessed by a demon, and Jesus casts out the demon, kills all the pigs. Probably the Jewish disciples are thinking, good, pig's dead. And they're all sitting there, and Jesus is talking now to the formerly demon-possessed man. And here come the townspeople, Gentiles, all up in arms about what has happened. Verse, where were we? 16. Those who had seen it described to them what had happened, to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. So before the demons begged, now these people are begging, but they're begging Jesus to leave. One of the saddest verses in all Scripture. They're begging Jesus to leave them. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him. So now the formerly demon-possessed man is begging Jesus to go with him, and Jesus says no. And he tells him, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim, to intensely announce in the Decapolis, that's a grouping of 10 Gentile cities, how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. Everyone marveled. A couple of things. First, notice what Jesus tells the man. He says, go tell everybody how much the Lord has done for you. And then what did the man do in verse 20? He told everybody how much Jesus had done for him. So the man recognizes who Jesus is, that Jesus is the Lord. And he goes and tells everybody. But something that stands out here is many other times, we've actually seen it the last few weeks in the Gospel of Mark. When Jesus has done a miracle, he's told the people, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody what just happened here. Because Mark tells us there were times that they could not even get away to eat. They didn't have time even to provide sustenance for themselves, Jesus and the disciples. There were so many people swarming them, they couldn't even go into town. And so he told the people, don't tell anybody. But word still got around. But now Jesus is telling the man, go and tell everybody. Don't keep it quiet. Tell everybody in the Decapolis, all 10 cities. Go into all 10 cities, you walk in there, you tell them what God's done for you. He gives this man a mission. What's interesting, too, is as best we can tell, once Jesus leaves this area, the Gospel of Mark, the way it goes in the rest of the Gospel, Jesus doesn't go back to this area. He leaves and doesn't come back. He was there like a day, right? He crossed the sea, crossed the storm in the midst of the dishonor and disrespect from his disciples. He gets to the other side. He casts out the demons out of the man. He talks to the man, and then the people beg him to leave, and he leaves. He did all that, just in a day, and then he leaves, and he doesn't come back. And so he's basically telling the man, you be the missionary to this area. You be my disciple in this area. You're the first missionary. And you bring the good news to these people here. And the man took it as a personal commission. And he told anybody and everybody he could. It says the people marveled. They were amazed at what God had done for him. And now when we are supposed to tell people about Jesus, that's where we should always start. Is what has Jesus done for us? How far has Jesus brought us? I mean, if you know enough to know Jesus, you know enough to tell somebody about Jesus. And so he goes and he's telling these people. But the question that kept popping up in my mind when I was first beginning to prepare this message, why would Jesus travel through the storm, travel through the dishonor and disrespect of his disciples, only to immediately turn around and leave? Like, why didn't he set up camp there and do a big mission project in the Decapolis, in the 10 cities for months, trying to bring as many of these people to the gospel as possible? Why did he immediately turn around and leave? They got there, healed the man, and left. Well, that's the answer to the question. Jesus went to this area for the man. This man who was rejected, this man who was chained outside of town and broke the chains, this man that no one in the area wanted to deal with, this man that they thought was too much, too far gone, Jesus went out there to get him. Because no one is too far gone for Jesus. Nobody. Everybody may say that person's too far gone, that person's done too much, that person's been too bad, that person is way too outside the box, way too far. They passed the line when they were 3 and have never gone back. They are way too far. But no one, as long as they're still on this earth, no one is too far gone for Jesus. He goes across the Sea of Galilee, a storm, knowing his disciples are going to say what they're going to say, knowing the fear that's going to be in them, knowing that as soon as he gets to the other side, the people are going to kick him out. But he still went there for this one man. And for his disciples to see this. We're going to go across the sea through a storm to heal a Gentile. And I want you to see it. And Jesus went there for that man and sent the man out with the gospel to preach the gospel to as many people as he could. No one is too far gone for Jesus. I mean, look at who he reached. His own disciples were not trained in this business. They didn't know how to preach. They didn't know how to public speak. They didn't know how to do any of that stuff. Some of them are hated by the very people they were going to go and tell Jesus about, like Matthew the tax collector. And then who does he call to be the greatest, as far as we can tell, most influential missionary in the history of the world? The Apostle Paul, a murderer, a man who hated Christians. He relished in busting in their house and breaking up their families and taking them to jail. And that's the guy that Jesus called out. No one is too far gone for Jesus. You may have somebody whispering in the back of your mind. Maybe it's from childhood. Maybe it's the enemy saying, you're not good enough. You're too far. You have done too much. You've done too many bad things. You've got one too many felonies on your record. You have gone too far. Well, if you're still breathing, you're not done. No one is too far gone for Jesus. And nobody can tell you that you've gone too far, that you've done too much, that your past is too big to do something now. Somebody's going to try to tell you that. They're a liar. They're not Jesus. They're just as broken as you are. So don't listen to that mess. No one is too far gone for Jesus. Jesus went across the sea to heal a Gentile demon-possessed man. Not just one demon, he's got a bunch of them. And maybe you're thinking, well, I know some people with some demons. They got some problems, and they're causing problems for me. Jesus needs to heal them because they are messed up. I want to cast them out of that city. No one, even those kind of people, are too far gone for Jesus. Jesus can reach anybody. Jesus came to the man. He came across the sea to the man. But I pointed it out when we read it. Look back, chapter 5, verse, let's see, where is it? 6. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. Jesus came to the man, but the man still had to come to Jesus. Jesus will come to every one of us, wherever we are, however far we have gone from Jesus. But we still have to turn around and come to Jesus. We still have to make the decision, Jesus, I want to follow you. He tells us it's a decision we have to make. That's why he says, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved. You have to make the decision to believe. You have to make the decision to turn. Jonah, in the midst of the giant fish, God was with him in the fish. He still had to turn and say, God, I'm sorry. I repent and I will do what you want me to do. He's with you, even if you're in the belly of a fish, even if you have made decision after decision after decision that has gotten you away from where God wanted you to be, you can still turn around right now and find that peace in Jesus. But you've got to turn to him. This man, even still with the demons in him, still came and ran to Jesus, still knew, even with that many problems, knew he needed help. And he ran to Jesus and fell down at his feet. Jesus came to the man, but the man still had to come to Jesus. And only by coming to Jesus was he able to find peace. And peace comes to anyone who comes to Jesus. Peace comes to anyone who comes to Jesus. If they just come to him, seek him out for peace. Maybe not in an accusatory fashion in the way the disciples did in the boat. They could have had the peace that the man had after the storm. They could have had the peace that Jesus had to be able to sleep through the storm. But instead of looking to Jesus, they looked to the storm. They looked at how bad the storm was, how rough the seas were, how hard the wind was, how high the water was coming. They looked at how bad their problems were instead of looking to Jesus. And so looking to their problems, they could not find peace. Because problems don't produce peace. Problems suppress peace. And if we focus on the problems, we're never going to find peace. We're always going to have the anxiety. We're always going to have the worry. We're always going to be away from the comfort that the Comforter provides. Peace comes to anyone who comes to Jesus. At a word, Jesus calmed the storm on the sea. At a word, Jesus calmed the storm in the man. So the sea and the man both experienced peace at the word of Jesus. Or, to say it how John, the apostle, says it in John chapter 1, the Word, Jesus is the Word. Peace came because of a word from the Word. The Word came and peace came. When Jesus comes, peace comes. But if we prevent Jesus' influence within our hearts, we're preventing the peace that he can bring. Peace comes to anyone who comes to Jesus. So the questions for you this morning are you in a storm? I guarantee you are, most of you, all of you. Maybe you're in a storm and don't realize it. Maybe you just came out of one and you're trying to just catch your breath because it was so rough. Maybe you know one's coming. You're trying to head it off. Maybe you're right in the thick of it and you're not getting much sleep and your anxiety level is super high and you can't chug enough coffee to keep yourself going and you're just out of it because you're in the middle of that storm. And you're like the disciples saying, do you not even care? We're dying here, Jesus. Maybe there's somebody who's told you you're too far gone. Maybe there's somebody you know who has been told that they're too far gone for Jesus. And you need to understand yourself, no one is too far gone for Jesus. Both in comfort for you, but in how you think about and talk to, interact with other people. Stop thinking about people as you scroll. Well, that person's too far gone. I'm going to scroll past them quick because they're messed up. Well, we're all messed up. Stop thinking when you walk through Walmart, I'm going to skip this aisle because I don't want to deal with that person. Start seeing people as Jesus does, who crossed the Sea of Galilee through a storm to get to a man who everybody thought was too far gone. Nobody's too far gone for Jesus. And if you have Jesus in you, that means nobody's too far gone for you. Nobody's too far gone. And then finally, do you need peace? Do you need peace? Do you need more peace? Peace like a river attendeth our way. It is well with my soul. I love that story that some of you know. That great song, the hymn, It Is Well With My Soul, was written down by a man who should have had so much turmoil in his life, he had no reason to write that song. He lived in Chicago. When the great Chicago fire came through, destroyed everything. His family had been planning at the time to go over to see the famous preacher Dwight Moody, who was in England at the time. But he couldn't go because the fire had destroyed everything, and they were going to have this big town meeting in Chicago to try to divvy up who owned what, because there were no boundary markers. Everything was gone. In the midst of this, I think he had 4 daughters and a son. His son dies. His son gets sick and dies. Late 1800s, Chicago, there's not medicine like today. His son dies. Little kid. So his son dies. He lost it, financially, wiped out. He's going to go to this meeting, get everything set, but he's going to go ahead and send his wife and his daughters across the sea. And he'll meet up with them after they have this meeting and get the boundary markers sorted out. Well, his wife goes off and he's getting ready for this meeting. His daughters go off. The boat that they're in has a collision. Almost everybody on the boat saved except his 4 daughters. All 4 of them drown. He gets a telegram from his wife. His communication is not like today. The telegram just says, saved alone. And so he knows from those 2 words, his daughters are dead. So now he's lost his son, he's financially ruined, and he's lost all 4 of his daughters. So he abandons everything in Chicago, jumps on the first boat he can find, and makes his way to England to meet up with his wife. And he gets to see the ship captain, and he says, I want you to tell me about the spot when we're going to England that ship went down, that my daughters are down there at the bottom of the sea. I want you to get me and come and tell me when it is. And so he does, and this guy's named Horatio. He goes out there, and he's walking on the deck of that ship. And that's when he writes those words. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll. And he gets to the chorus, and he's able to write. How impossible is it able to write? It is well with my soul. He says, it's well with my soul, not because the storm is raging, and the storm was. I mean, he experienced probably the worst pain anybody can experience on this earth, the death of a child. And he's still able to sing, it is well with my soul, because he's looking at Jesus, not at the waves. He's looking at Jesus, not at the power of the wind. He's looking at Jesus, not at how high the water's rising. He's focused on Jesus. So no matter the storm, peace can come if you're looking to Jesus. Peace comes to anyone who comes to Jesus. And so really, there's only one question today. Will you come to Jesus? If you don't know Jesus, this is your moment. Will you come to Jesus and know him today? Will you come to Jesus and believe in him today? Will you believe that Jesus, God's Son, died so all your sins will be forgiven? All of them. Even the stuff you haven't done yet. That he rose from the dead so you can live after you die. Will you believe that? Then you can know Jesus. Then you can know peace. Maybe you do know Jesus and peace has fled from you and you don't know how to get it back. Will you come to Jesus even in that moment? That doesn't mean peace is always going to be there, that it's always going to be easy. No, Jesus actually promises as long as you're living in this terrible, broken world, things are going to be hard and difficult. But we got to keep coming to Jesus. Keep finding that peace. Will you come to Jesus today?